Aesthetics go much deeper than just, fashion. There's a feeling around how I live life. There's a feeling around how I move through life, because aesthetics are more than just how things look. They're more about how things feel. Another day, another podcast. Welcome back. Today I actually have a coffee, so jokes on who. Anyways, welcome back to the podcast. I realized that I have a stain on my hoodie, but not just one stain, actually two stains. And this hoodie was clean this morning, but I'm just a clumsy girl aesthetic, should I say that? And that sort of blends in nicely with what I want us to talk about today. So if you see the stains on my jumper, if you're watching this on YouTube, be cool about it, okay? Just be cool. Anyways, today I want us to talk about a really super duper interesting topic that I have just been thinking about as usual. We always talk about stuff that I'm thinking about. Today I want to talk about aesthetics. Very simple. Aesthetics. I've been thinking a lot about aesthetics and how it's a sort of culture in a way to be defined by an aesthetic, to be in an aesthetic. It is something that people strive towards, people including me. And I've been thinking about how aesthetics go much deeper than just, fashion and the way you show up in terms of dressing. They go so much deeper than that. And I did some research, I mused a little on my thoughts, and now here we are, ready to share what I've learned and what I have been thinking about. So as the title of this video goes, you are an aesthetic. You are an aesthetic. You are an aesthetic. I feel like the first time when I said it, it sounded like you are an aesthetic, like the medicine that you're given so that you sleep. And I want us to look at how aesthetics go much deeper than the surface. It's just going to be a sort of shallow dive into aesthetics, what they mean, their history, and how they define us. Firstly, I want us to look at the aesthetics culture. Most basic knowledge we have about aesthetics is that it's a sort of category that defines how you dress, the mood of whatever you put on, and in a way also how you carry yourself. We know that aesthetics are a fashion thing, but it goes much deeper than that, because it also goes to how you behave, how you act, your routines, what you believe about yourself. It's more of a feeling than a look. When you put on a certain aesthetic, it's more about how it makes you feel than how it makes you look. In this modern life, people often build their lives around specific aesthetics that already exist. Something like coquette aesthetic, dark academia aesthetic. We also have earth girl aesthetics. People can easily curate their lives online to fit specific aesthetics. And I feel like people rarely realize that they themselves already embody an aesthetic through their natural habits, their way of living, their gestures, just who they are already embodies an aesthetic that they live every single day, but which can be suppressed. You can actually suppress your own natural aesthetic by trying to fit way too much into one specific named aesthetic. I feel like the internet also makes aesthetics feel like more of something that you curate and you create rather than something that is lived and felt. And if you look at the history of aesthetics, you really see that aesthetics are more about emotion. They began as something sensory, but as time progressed, they became more of visual and something that you can actually curate or sort of fake in a way. I want us to look at a small history of aesthetics. I feel like right now, aesthetics have sort of turned into an identity rather than a sensory experience. It's more of you becoming a certain aesthetic, is you taking up that identity rather than you expressing yourself and feeling things in a certain way. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but aesthetics have become more visual and more of something you can curate rather than something that you live. For example, if I decide to choose a specific aesthetic, I can actually pretend to be that aesthetic by how I show up online. If I decide to choose, for example, a coquette aesthetic, I can dress up in a coquette way. I can use bows on a lot of things. And even without you asking me, you can be able to place me within an aesthetic based on just how I show up in life visually. Aesthetics nowadays have become more of visual than something that's a way of life or a way that you live, something that is felt from just your own existence. Where did aesthetics begin? How did it move from being something that's more of felt and sensory to something that is curated, something that is seen, and something that you can actually fake? Firstly, the word aesthetic comes from a Greek word, which I probably don't know how to pronounce, but aesthesis, I think. You can see the word on the screen if you're watching this on YouTube, and it means perception or sensation. The word was first used in philosophy by Alexander Baumgarten in the 18th century. He defined aesthetics as the science of sensory knowledge, basically just how we experience beauty, art, and taste through feeling rather than logic. Your own personal taste, how you experience it through feeling rather than logic. Later on, a guy known as Immanuel Kant built on this idea, but for him, aesthetic judgment was unique because it was subjective yet universal. Beauty, he said, isn't about usefulness or morality, but about the pleasure we take in perceiving something. I feel like that's a really strong line. Beauty isn't about usefulness or morality, but about the pleasure we take in perceiving something. That's why aesthetics has always been about more than just looks. It's about what moves us, what we feel. Aesthetics moved on in the 18th and 19th centuries, which were the Romantic era, and they were made more personal in this era. Beauty became tied to emotion, to individuality, and rebellion against the rigid and rational world. So art and beauty was no longer just for the elites and for the high class, but they became expressions of inner life. You could say that this era actually birthed the idea that your way of being, like your thoughts, your dreams, your feeling, your mood, could itself be aesthetic. Before, aesthetics could only be found in something like art, something like actual beauty, but in the Romantic era, even life itself, your movement, your way of life became something that could be aesthetic. Then we head on to the 20th century, the century of modernism and aesthetic movements. Aesthetics now became cultural. There were movements like minimalism, modernism, surrealism, and postmodernism, which redefined beauty and rejected the old standards completely. At the same time, youth subcultures, like punks, goths, hippies, they started creating their own aesthetics to express resistance, identity, and belonging. Each look, each sound, each symbol actually carried meaning. It was rebellion, it was community, and storytelling, not just fashion. So here is where we see that aesthetics became more than just a way of expression, but it became something that's an identity, a sense of belonging, a sense of community, and also to express resistance or to express rebellion, just like in the Romantic era. I feel like we're going into a lot of history, but bear with me, we're almost done with the history. Then we have the digital era, where it moves from just arts and beauty to algorithms. The internet made aesthetics visual, fast, and participatory. Hashtags. You can create an outfit, create a video, hashtag cottagecore, hashtag clean girl, hashtag dark academia. Aesthetics became something that you can participate in online. Platforms like Tumblr, Pinterest, and even TikTok allowed anyone to actually curate beauty, no longer through painting or poetry, but through images, outfits, routines, and playlists. Now, aesthetics became microcultures. Here is where aesthetics were no longer just about how something feels or how it feels to live a certain life, but it was more about how something looks. Now, aesthetic has evolved from describing art to describing the self. People use aesthetics to mean my way of seeing and my way of being in the world, which is both freeing and limiting at the same time. Now, if you look very deeply at this history of aesthetics, we have noticed one core thing is that aesthetics have evolved from a way of experiencing things, a way of feeling things, to a way of living life, from a way of describing art, because initially aesthetics were a word that described art and beauty, but nowadays it can even describe the self. It can describe you as a person. When you identify as a certain aesthetic, you are saying, this is my way of being, this is my way of seeing in the world. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I just want us to get a deep dive into aesthetics and what it means to say that you belong to a certain aesthetic and how people struggle to find an aesthetic and whether or not everyone is aesthetic. Firstly, why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this because I have recently been observing just how every single person is an individual. And when I say that, I don't mean physically individual. Yeah, people are individuals physically. You're one soul, all in one body. You don't share your body with anyone else. You're the only one experiencing your body. You're the only one experiencing your life in this moment in time, in this moment in space. That's one way of seeing the word individual. But what I mean is, even in the smallest of things that people do, that people say, in the smallest of ways that people act, they are individual and they are unique. You can have some gestures which are collective, which many people use. For example, the way I'm using my hands, my hand gestures, it's something that everyone else can do, but the way that I put my thoughts together is unique to me. The way that I move through my life, the way that I do things, the way that I feel things is unique to me. The way that I think is unique to me. And one thing I've noticed is that there's an aura around all this, or there's a feeling around all this. There's a feeling around how I live life. There's a feeling around how I move through life. There's a feeling around my choices. And this feeling creates an aesthetic. That is what I've been thinking about. I've been thinking about how every single person is unique in the way that they live life. Some people, though, might have repressed themselves to fit into a certain aesthetic, and their routines, the way they show up in life, is sort of condensed to fit an aesthetic. But still, it's almost as if it's something you can't control. You just can't control how your aura gets itself out. You can't control the fact that you have an individuality, a sense of individuality, no matter how hard you try to suppress it, no matter how hard your individuality has been concealed and covered by other things that you try to become. It always just seems to somehow seep through and be seen. I have been actually pondering over this for a while, even just watching the people around me, the way they do things, the way they speak, the way they are. I just feel an aesthetic that is unique to them surrounding them when they go to their closet, what they choose to wear, how they choose to match their pieces. Because if you were to give two people the same set of clothes, you were to give them two pairs of clothing, you give them two t-shirts, two dresses, two pairs of pants, two shoes, and you were to ask someone to create an outfit for themselves, there would be something distinct in each. If you were to give people a set of common ingredients and ask them to put them together in a certain way, it would come out differently. Okay, I think I have the perfect example. If you were to give every person a painting palette and you were to give them one color and one paintbrush, and you ask them to just paint whatever they want, every single person will paint a different thing. And I bet you 10 Kenyan shillings, I bet that there would be no two people in the whole world who would have the same painting, like completely similar. 2 people, 3 people, 10,000 people might have painted a heart, but it'll look different. It will have a different style to it. Like every other person has a different sense of being and a different way of doing and living. Every other person has an aesthetic. That is my general conclusion. That's like what I have come to conclude. And as we have said that in the 20th century, aesthetics were developed by youths especially to be a sense of belonging rather than something visual. It was more of to create a sense of identity and a sense of belonging. That's why they had groups like goths, groups like hippies, punks. People would create community around aesthetics to express resistance, identity, and belonging, right? And when I think about this, every other aesthetic has a sort of way of life, a sort of way of seeing the world, a way of living through life, a way of moving through life. And I think it can be somehow dangerous if you define yourself by an aesthetic that does not align with how you want to live your life. And you feel sort of compelled to live your life based on the rules of this aesthetic. It's as if aesthetics are little micro communities that have rules and have regulations and have certain things that you're supposed to do and certain things you're not supposed to do. So you can find your sense of individuality, your sense of control over your actions, over what you do, over how you live is controlled by an aesthetic rather than your own moral compass, your own values, your own beliefs, and your own identity as a person. You find that your identity sort of becomes lost within the aesthetic, and you no longer think for yourself, you no longer feel and move through life as yourself, but you move through life as the aesthetic that you have fit yourself into. And in as much as aesthetics are cool, they're cool, it's cute and it's fun to call yourself an aesthetic and to feel this sense of belonging to this community which you don't even know. It's not like physical, it's not a community you actually enter, but it's more of a mental and a sensory community. And it feels very comforting to just say you're a certain aesthetic, to feel like you have a sense of belonging. You have people, you have people who match up with you, and you have people who you match and mesh well together. It feels nice because, as human beings, we're always trying to look for community. We're always trying to find people like us. And I feel like when you create aesthetics, when you fit yourself into an aesthetic, you feel that need for community is somehow soothed in a way. You can say, oh, I am a dark academia, I am cottagecore, I am earth girl aesthetic, I am indie core. There's so many cores these days, I swear. There's even fisherman core, fisher girl core. I don't know. There's even rat girl core. Oh my god, there's rat girl core. There's so many, literally so many different aesthetics that have come up. And if you value that sense of belonging more than you value your own identity, your sense of individuality, then you can lose yourself in an aesthetic. I'm not saying aesthetics are bad. I'm just saying that they might not be for everyone. Like some people you will find fit so well in aesthetics. Like it's as if that's the place they were always meant to be. They call themselves an aesthetic and you can just see it is who they are, and their individuality, their sense of living, their sense of being fits so nicely into the aesthetic. It's as if they've actually found their place. And if you are like that, congratulations. Like it's awesome, it's nice when you actually find a place that resonates with you and feels like you are home. You've actually found a sense of home within an aesthetic. But other people do struggle to fit into aesthetics. And I think it's just that I've never really had the desire to fit into an aesthetic, but if I try to place myself in an aesthetic, I don't fit in. I don't, because what I wear it's sort of mixed in a way. So I cannot say that I am a specific aesthetic because I am not, I am just little bits of so many different aesthetics, and that's just who I am. So I don't fit into an aesthetic, and that's okay. But you can find for some people, when they're seeking like a sense of belonging, they really try to fit themselves into aesthetics, even though none of them fully describes them. And maybe this whole video is to say that that's okay. It's okay to not fit into aesthetics. Aesthetics are not a way of life that you're meant to fit into. They are instead supposed to fit you. You're not the one to fit into the aesthetic. It's the aesthetic that's to fit you. And if it doesn't fit you, then you don't have to keep trying. Because I think when you remember that aesthetics are more than just fashion-wise, they are something that goes deeper. It goes to how you live your life, how you show up in life, what you believe about life. Then you can be more careful to not call yourself an aesthetic, or to not try and force yourself into aesthetics, because they go much deeper than just feeling. It's a way of moving through life. And I think something that shows us so much that aesthetics, they are not all encompassing. Aesthetics don't fully describe all the ways of living that there can ever be, is the fact that there's this emergence of micro aesthetics. Within a major aesthetic, there's branches. Something like within cottagecore, we have fairycore, we have goblincore. So many different aesthetics within an aesthetic. I think that's evidence of the fact that you cannot fully describe something through an aesthetic, because within that aesthetic, there's other aesthetics. And I'm pretty sure within the micro aesthetics, there's micro aesthetics. Should we start calling them nano aesthetics, pico aesthetics? Because they get to really tiny levels as you try to explain the very way that someone lives, the very way that someone moves, the very way that someone feels life and senses and exists. As we said, aesthetics are about how it feels to live a certain way. I think at the end of the day, aesthetics are more about self-appreciation and noticing the way that you live and being okay with it. When I say you are an aesthetic, I'm trying to mean that you need to embody more and to be more comfortable in how you do things, how you live your life, how you move through your life, and how it feels to move through your life. You need to be more okay with not fitting into any of the general aesthetics that have already been discovered. You need to be okay with just being that way, because imagine if you lived in the times where, for example, the earthy aesthetic had not been developed and you felt the pressure to fit into the punks or the goths, and your way of living and feeling life is sort of earthy and it's more grounded in nature, you would lose your sense of identity, your sense of authenticity and belonging, trying to fit into the aesthetics that had been named at the time. If you think about it, there's so many other aesthetics that haven't been named, and it's not a must. We don't need to name them. We just need to feel them. We don't need to give them names and give them and make them hashtags and make them communities. We just need to feel the way it feels, to live the way it feels, and to allow ourselves the feeling. Because aesthetics are more than just how things look, they're more about how things feel. So your way of doing things, from the simplest things like your handwriting, your facial expressions, your gestures, the way you make your tea, the way you make your coffee, whether or not you even make tea or coffee, the way you speak, your intonation, the way you think, the way you live, the way you write, the things you do, the things you like, the things you say, the things you don't, the thoughts you think, the places you go, the people you like, the people you don't like, the things that you find on social media to be interesting, the things that you scroll past on social media. Your very choices, your very life, your very self, your very way of being seems to be an aesthetic. And I think it's very powerful when someone appreciates and embodies themselves. When someone appreciates and embodies who they are, when someone lives daily in a sense of being okay with just how they live life, it becomes such a strong aura, such a strong aesthetic. It's something that you can easily feel through their work, through their way of being. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you are an aesthetic. You are an aesthetic, and it's enough for you to just be that. Instead of trying to fit into one, just allow yourself to embody the aesthetic you're already living, the aesthetic that exists in your everyday. Also allow yourself to notice the aesthetic, to notice how you move through life, how you feel life, and be okay with it. I feel like that's all the thoughts that I had on this topic. It's really not that serious. It's not way too serious. I'm not trying to say aesthetics are so bad and you should never fit into an aesthetic. Fit into whichever you fit in, but don't lose yourself in the process. I could have literally just said that. I could have summarized all my words into just that. I think we should practice the art of gatekeeping things a lot more than we do. I feel like the reason why people all feel like copies of each other is because we don't gatekeep. We don't gatekeep. We don't gatekeep anything, whether it's outfits. You know, when you get something cool, someone will be like, "Where did you get that?" And you start telling them and you tell everyone else where you got it, or you link your outfits, the places where you got your outfits. And there's this constant sharing of information. And in a way, it's good, you know, it's good that we don't gatekeep, because I'm not going to lie, I myself have found some awesome pieces of clothing because people did not gatekeep, because they told me where to find the gems. But at the same time, it kind of kills our individuality, because when someone figures out something, whether it's a hobby, whether it's a clothing store, they'll just come out and tell everyone about it, and then it's people create communities around it, or people all indulge in it, and it's no longer something personal and authentic. It feels shared. I saw a video the other day about a woman who was talking about thrifting and how there's no gatekeeping around thrifting. You know, when you find a good thrift store, you're just out there telling people about it, and people go to stores and they buy stuff because everyone else has it, not really because they want it. And she was talking about, when you choose clothing, can you go through your wardrobe, talking about every single outfit and why you like it, and how the fabric feels, why you like how the fabric feels, how do you pair it with other clothing in your wardrobe. And when she talked about that, she made me really think a lot about clothing choices and how you think about even buying stuff, not just from clothing, from just anything, you know. Do we buy things because they're beautiful, or do we buy things because we see us a part of ourselves in the things? Do we buy things because they are appealing, or do we buy things because we feel connected to them? It really made me think about that so much. And I think a tip for anyone who's trying to develop their individuality a little bit more is to think, to simply think, and to think more deeply about how connected you are to things that you purchase, especially things that you do on a daily basis. Do you do your morning routine a certain way because someone else does it that way, or do you do it a certain way because you feel connected to it? You know, ask yourself these very seemingly small questions, but they really just help you figure out who you are. And when you figure out who you are, your individuality, then you're able to live your aesthetic more truly, and your aura just becomes more magnetic and it really shines out more. So I've been trying to actually put that into my life. Like when I go to buy stuff, there are so many things in this world that are beautiful, but I don't have to buy something because it's beautiful. I have to, have some sort of connection to it. Why would I choose one cup over another cup if they're both beautiful? Which one do I feel connected to? Which one do I feel not connected to? What does it remind me of? Maybe the cup reminds me of a story I once had. Whenever I have the cup around me, it sort of holds more meaning. It doesn't just hold coffee or tea, it also holds a lot of meaning to me. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say. Your choices, the way you think about your choices, ends up creating a sense of aesthetic, a sense of individuality in your own life. So maybe think about your choices a little bit more. And yeah, I'm done. I'm done yapping for the day. But thank you for watching. Thank you for being here with me. I'm going to see you in the next episode. Remember, you are an aesthetic, so be a little bit more curious about the you core, the you aesthetic. From me to you, have a really lovely day. I'm finishing filming this at 2:09 p.m. on the 9th of November 2025. I'll see you in the very next episode. Same time, same place next week.